Hello and welcome to Transform Tuesday. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Sarah Mitchell in charge of our documentation department. Today we're going to be talking, of course, about Alpha Transform, but we're going to be continuing our discussion about doing reporting in Alpha Anywhere using data that was extracted from the Transform system. Before we get started, Sarah, can you let me know whether or not my screen is showing up and whether or not my voice is coming through?
I can see your screen.
Excellent. And obviously you can hear me. That makes sense.
I can hear you, yes.
All right. So let's get right into it. I'm going to dive live into Alpha Anywhere today. Now, if you joined us last week, we had put together this report that was measuring a metric from our transform data. And that metric was approximately how many minutes late on average were our technicians on particular days. It's sort of a made up metric. You probably have better ones that you actually want to track, but I just thought I'd use this one as an example. I'm going to go ahead and preview that report just to remind you where we were. And you'll see that it's asking now for a starting and ending date. And that's because we've added what we call arguments into this report. I think I showed you how to do that last week, but I'm going to show it to you again this week because it's really important for the steps that follow. So with the argument values, these are basically like variables or parameters that are passed in to Alpha Anywhere to tell it on what dates we're interested in seeing the data. So basically it acts as a type of filter. So I've told it I'm only interested in dates in December, so just show me those. And when I preview that report, there they are, just the December dates. All right, so that was that. Now let's go in. I'm going to show you how I built that. When I created my report, I went up here and I clicked on this filter button. And in the filter button, I decided that I was going to use some arguments. Arguments, like I said, are things that you can pass into a report from somewhere else. For example, you could pass them in from a web page, or you could pass them in from a script. And we're going to do it based on a web page, actually a script in a web page in just a few minutes. But let me show you how you set these up. Because I wanted to have a start date and an end date, I created these two arguments here, and I did it by clicking Define Filter Arguments. So here in Filter Arguments, I created one called Start Date, and the way I did that was, in fact, I can remove it and add it back in and show you, is I just clicked Add, and I gave it a name, Start Date, and then I told it what type of value Start Date is going to contain. So start date, even though it says date, we actually set this up behind the scenes as a time field, which keeps track of both the date and the time. So it's important that those match or you'll get an error when you try to run your report. Once I set up start date, I then told it when I'm doing a print preview, in other words, while I'm designing this report, I'd like you to show me a calendar control to set those parameters, the start date and the end date, and in this case, start date. So I'm going to click OK. And then what I did was I built a filter, and I'm going to delete this filter. I'm going to start again to show you how it's built. All right, so what I did to build the filter for the report is I first put in the scheduled time because this is what I wanted to filter on. I'm only interested in times that have the date sometime in December. So to do that, I first needed to convert this time field into a, no, I don't have to convert it into anything. Sorry about that. What I need to do is I need to use the between function, which is an Alpha Anywhere function, between. And this is a function which takes three parameters. The first parameter is the one that's being examined. In this case, it's the schedule time. And then there's the starting expression. What does it need? When does it need to come after? In other words, if it's going to be between things, it has to come before something and after something else. So what does it need to come after is the first expression. And here I'm going to choose arguments right here from this list. And there's my start argument. And now I'm going to put in my end argument. So I'm going to go to arguments and I'm going to choose end date argument. Okay, close parentheses. And you'll see that result is false in this particular case for this one record that it's looking at. But what that also means is that there are no syntax errors because it's given us an answer here. So I'm going to click OK. OK again. I'm going to save this. Now let's confirm that this still works, that I didn't break anything while I blew out the arguments and reset the filter. So I'm going to hit print preview again. And there are my arguments again. So I'm going to go back to December, because that's the date range I'm interested in. And we'll set it to the 31st, and I'm going to click OK. And sure enough, it is filtered. Let's go to the last page of the report just to make sure that it didn't like spill over. Nope, the last one is on 12/30. Great. All right, so that's it. That's how you put those arguments into the report. But we don't want to call the report from inside this Alpha Anywhere development environment. We want to put this into our web application so that users on the web would be able to run this report. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. So I'm going to close down this report. And this was called On Time 2 report. We'll need to know that in a moment. And I'm going to create a UX control. So I'm just going to say new. Oops, I'm going to first of all go to Web Components here in the Web Projects Control Panel. And I'm going to say new UX. Think of a UX as like a form. It's an interface component. So I'm going to choose Web Component. I'm going to choose UX. And I'm not going to use any of the templates provided. I'm going to start with a blank UX component. And it doesn't really matter if you use pulse effect or not. That's just a graphical effect that appears on the buttons. So now here's our UX builder. It doesn't have anything in it. So we first need to add some controls to it. So the first control we probably want to add is a calendar. So we're going to go into data controls and we're going to choose the calendar control, which I think is down here. That might be wrong. Might be up further. Oh, there it is. Calendar control. And I want to see calendar controls can also be set for date or time. We're going to use the time field because, as you recall, that is how we have it set up in the database underneath. So we're going to call this one start date. And oops, the name needs to not have spaces in it. These are variable names. But the label, of course, can have a space. So I'm going to say start date. So I'm going to click OK. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a little bit of space between the start date and the next calendar control, which will be the end date. And there are a whole bunch of different ways of doing that. You could set properties here. What I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to stick in a piece of text in between to create a spacing. And I'm going to find that in other controls, static text. I actually don't have to put anything in that text box. There it is. But I do want to set its width to, I don't know, about 225 pixels. So I'll have a nice space between that and the next control. Now notice up here, there's a little paragraph marker. That indicates that these are going to be on separate lines. That's not what I want, actually. I want them on the same line. So I'm going to remove those paragraph markers by untoggling them right there. And now I'm going to add in my second calendar control, which will be for end date. So I'm going to go down to, well, let's find data controls. Scroll down to the calendar control. Come on. There we go. And there's the calendar control. This variable I'm going to call end date, and its label will be end date with a space in between. Again, we've set it to a time field. All right, and then the next thing we want to do after we make these two selections is we want to have a button which runs our report. So we're going to go down here to other controls, and I'm going to grab a button. Here it is. And I'm going to call this run report. That's the text that's going to appear on the button. Now I haven't hooked these up. I've just placed these controls here, but let's see what they look like. I'm going to go ahead and save this. We'll call this reports 5. Okay. And we'll go take a look at it in live preview. We often get questions, what's the difference between live preview and working preview? Working preview is a feature that we used to use fairly often because it was just a quicker way to preview what you're working on. It turns out now that live preview and working preview run basically the same in most circumstances, and live preview can preview things that working preview can't, like reports. So I tend to always use live preview and just ignore working preview. Just a little tip there. So I'm going to go to live preview, and then I'm going to go to full preview, so it publishes everything. And in a moment, aha, there it is. There's my start date, there's my end date, these are my calendar controls, and there's my button. And I can click that button. Well, maybe you could see the pulse effect. I don't know how good the video is on GoToWebinar today, but it's got that. It's kind of cool. But as you can see, it doesn't do anything when I click the Run Report button. So what we need to do is set up that Run Report button so that it runs our report. And this is how we do that. I'm going to double click on this button to open up its properties. And here I'm going to add a new action to that button. And because there's a whole bunch of actions to choose from, I find it easier to use the filter. So I'm just going to type in report, if I spell it right. And I've got a couple of options. One of it is this action to email a report. There's some other, this advanced report one, I don't know what that is. This one runs a report inside your component. But the one I want is the first one, open or email a report or layout. And what I want to do is I want to open it. So the report to choose is, we're choosing on time 2. If you remember, I said, remember that because we need it later. There's our report. And now here we are, and it's asking us about arguments. So those arguments, if you recall, we set up arguments in the report for the start date and end date. And we're going to go in here and say define arguments. And here we're also going to have a start date and end date. I'm sorry, we actually have arguments here for start date and end date. So how do we set these? We set the argument value for those dates right here, and we choose, in this case it says field placeholder, our start date field. That was the control that we placed earlier on our UX button. For end date, I think you can follow what I'm going to do here. When I set argument value, instead I'm going to choose the end date. And that was all there was to it, if I did it right, to hook it up and have it appear like that. So those are the start dates and end dates. So, and we'll see them here under argument bindings. For initial view, you have a couple of choices. You can have it open up as a PDF. It'll generate your report as a PDF, and you'll see that in whatever the PDF viewer is for your browser. But I'm going to do this as HTML instead. And it gives you a couple other options when you do HTML, including putting up these buttons that we'll see on the interface that let the user actually download our report in lots of different in several different file formats. Okay, I don't think there's anything else I need to do here. Notice the target I have set to window. That means that the window is going to pop up on top of our web page to show us the report. And it's going to be a modal type pop-up, meaning that I won't be able to do anything until I close that window down at the end. So we're going to just go ahead and leave these settings as they are. And we're going to call this run report with arguments. It's just a note for us later. And I'm going to click save. And we're going to click save again. And I'm going to go to live preview. I'm going to do a full preview. And I'm going to choose dates. Let's go back to the year 2019 if we can. And we'll go back to the month of December and the 1st of December. We'll do the same here. Back to 2019, back to December, and we're going to go to the end of December. So 1st of December, 31st of December. Now I'm going to click Run Report, and if I've done this right, our report should appear here in the window, and it does. So you'll see right now that the report has now been filtered, so we're only looking at the December dates like that we've done today. And it's appeared here in this window, which you can move around. I'm not showing it to you in this browser. It's actually an embedded browser. Maybe just open it up here in Edge, and I'll show you what it looks like. Give you a more realistic preview. So again, it's going to ask you for those dates again. So let's just go grab 2019, December, the 1st and the 31st. Now when I run this report, there it is. Now, what's cool about this is, you remember I had all those options left checked. Those are the options that let me decide how I allow the user to export this data if they choose to. So let me just show you how one of these works. You can actually click the Excel button here, and I'm gonna say that I want to open it, and my browser is set up to open these types of files. And here's my report in Microsoft Excel. That same data that's come out. Now I can use it in Excel format if I wish. So that's all there is to it. So that's about as far as we're going to get today. You know, Transform Tuesday 2 tend to be short sessions, unlike our Wednesday webinars. But what I would like to show in future episodes will be how to make the report look nicer and how to make this interface look nicer. So I've shown you how to actually, in previous episodes, how to extract data from TransForm, how to build a report out of that data, and how to filter it and call it from a web page. But I'd like to show you in future ones how to make it, you know, look good, make it look like a good, proper application. Not getting into that today. But there is one other thing I still want to show you. So let me go ahead and close the window. Oh, by the way, with this default style, and this will be one of the things we change, you probably can't see this X that I'm pointing to. Maybe you can, but it's really faint. But trust me, it's there. When you click on it, it does close the window. So I'm going to go ahead and go back. I'm going to close this. Same here, close that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this reports 5 component and I'm going to put it onto a web page so that I can actually publish it up to the internet. And we're going to do that right now. So let me close down this component. Oops, not the web projects control panel. Close the component. And I'm going to build a new web page. I'm going to choose A5W page. I'm going to say new. And here I am in the WYSIWYG view. I could say report page if I wanted to. And I could make it, let's do Arial. I think that's a nicer font. Where's Arial? And let's make it a little bigger. Let's go with 18 points, bold. All right. Put in a carriage return. And I'm going to save this. I'm going to call this my, I already have a report page 2. Let's call this report page. I guess we're going with the number 5 today. Report page 5, I'll call this. And on report page 5, I'm going to insert my component. Now notice I saved first. You always need to save these pages before you insert a component. If you don't, it'll warn you, but just a tip right there. And now I'm going to select a component and we are going to choose reports 5 component. And I'm going to click OK. And you'll see these little placeholder blocks indicating that my component has been inserted properly. So I'm going to go ahead and save that again. And now let's just execute this page. Oops. Let's do a live preview and see what this web page looks like. Now this is still just on my computer. It isn't up on the internet. It's local, but you'll see that it does seem to be working. I wonder if I choose reports here, if it'll have anything for February 11th. Nope, there are no records. Okay. So let's close that down, and now I've got a page. But let's take it one step further. Let's put this page up on the internet so we can actually play with it live. So I'm going to close down this page, and I'm going to go back to my web projects control panel. I'm going to go into Alpha Cloud because I have an Alpha Cloud account, and I'm going to just go ahead and publish to my cloud account. Now I've already set up this account and entered in my username and password, but now that that's all set, I can just go ahead and click OK, and it will upload my files. And I think it's just 2 files it needs to do. It should give me a list here in a minute. Oh, it's a few more than that, but if you'll see the files that it's going to create, it's going to create this report page 5.a5w. It's going to create one called reports2.a5w. That was one I was working on before I started the webinar, so don't worry about that one. Reports5.a5w web component, that's our UX control that we built, and a couple other reports I was modifying. So that's fine. I'll go ahead and publish those. Let me click OK. And it's going to take those files and push it up live onto my Alpha Cloud account. That sort of walks me here through the process. Once it's done with these, so it looks like 6 steps, a dialog box is going to appear showing you some other processes that are happening now that my page is up on the cloud. And when it's done, this website link here is going to light up, and I'm going to be able to click on it. So that shouldn't take too long. Usually this takes about, well, less than a minute, 30 seconds usually. So let's see what's going on. Of course, this is a live demo. Oh, here we go. It's starting. So we'll just give this a minute. In the meantime, of course, if you have any questions, I haven't been monitoring the questions box yet, but if you do, go ahead and type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. See if I can get this during this session.
So Dave, you did have a question about the between function.
The between, does it include the start date and end date, or does it exclude the start date and end date? It includes them, is what I found from that. So it's like on or after December 1st, or on or before December 30th. Someone said, oh, yep, it's pulsing. And someone else asked whether or not Chrome or the new Edge, pros or cons. I can only give you my gut feel on that one. I'm really enjoying Edge recently, to be honest with you, but you know, whatever. They both perform fine with Alpha Anywhere, so I don't really have an issue one way or the other. So anyway, it looks like this is finished publishing, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that website link. And that just takes me to the main page of my website on the cloud, but the page in particular that we created was called Report Page 5. So let's go to Report Page 5. I'll click OK, and we should see those two calendar controls and the report page that we just built. So let's go back in time to 2019, and let's start, and we'll go to December. Let's set those dates. So the 1st of December through the 31st of December. I'm going to go ahead and run the report. There we go. Now, we don't have, you're probably saying, well, you just told me the between function includes it, but I see that starting at 12:02. Well, the trick is actually with this data is that we don't have any of our workers working on weekends. So the first possible time could have been on the 2nd of November. That's just how the sample data is set up. So you'll see that not every single day is here. Like it jumps from the 6th to the 9th. Which makes sense because the 7th and the 8th were weekend days. So it appears to be working, which is cool. Let me go ahead and do the Excel export just as a final validation. Let's go ahead and open that. And there it is. So I don't know if you guys want to try that out on your side. I'll paste that link right into the chat window. Paste. There it is. If you go down to the chat window, you should be able to click on it and play with it yourself. Run your own report ranges if you like. Let's see what else we have for questions. I could provide the URL for the session ETL mentioned earlier. We can find that. What's the easiest way to find that, Sarah? Would that be the TransForm playlist page? I think it would be. If they wanted to find that session on ETL. YouTube. Oh, I'm sorry, the YouTube playlist. Let's take a look. YouTube. And we're going to go to our channel, the Alpha Software channel. And we have a playlist on the Alpha Software channel called TransForm Tuesday, somewhere here under all playlists. Created playlists. Am I looking at the wrong place?
No, you're looking right at it. It's on the right.
Oh, I am, aren't I? Thank you very much. And ETL continued. Oh, let me go ahead and kill that. So yeah, take a look at these in particular, the 15th and the 29th. So these two, maybe I'll be able to actually grab you the actual links. So let me grab those. Link 1. Quit playing that. So that's that one. And then the one from the following day, oh, sorry, is ETL continued. Sorry, not this one. Copy and paste. So they should be in the chat window for you. Let me just make sure I didn't paste the same link twice. Looks like I pasted the same link twice. Oops. click, pause, click, copy, copy. There, that's the other one. Nice. And then the list itself, well, you can just find that right on YouTube. So that should show you how to do it. And the reason we decided to do ETL as opposed, so there is an API that comes with Alpha Anywhere, and that's actually how we pull the data out to do our reports. But what we found is that it is better to take that data out and synchronize it with a SQL database, because then you could do all kinds of reports against it, and it you can do all kinds of reports against it and won't bog down the API as well. Sorry, I got distracted by another question. Someone said the 30th is a Tuesday. It is a Tuesday. I wonder why we don't have data for, we do have Tuesday data. Oh, the 31st is a Tuesday. Interesting. Let's go back and see whether or not I told you guys not the truth about that between function. Let's go between, let's go to our documentation system. Oh, let me show you an easy way to get there, actually. I'm going to go back into my report and reports, and we'll do the on-time report. I'm going to edit that. Let's go into the filter. There's my between function. While I'm on this function, I could say help on the current function. And that will open up our handy dandy documentation system. No, I was right. So less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. So it is inclusive of those dates. It's just simply that my data didn't have anything for the 31st. So between works as I thought it did. It will actually be inclusive of the dates that you put in. Let's see if there are any other questions. Not inclusive. Yeah, no, it should be inclusive. It's just probably simply that I didn't have dates for the 31st for some reason. It may have been smart enough to omit holidays. I may have put New Year's in, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Are there any other questions before we break? That looks like it. So I am out next week, but I will be back the following week, and then I plan to show you how to take those reports and those web pages and style them so they look like a proper modern web application. Until then, if you have any questions, go ahead and send them to tfservice@alphasoftware.com. Thanks very much for joining me. Thank you very much, Sarah, for helping out today, and hope to see you, well, 2 weeks from today. Take care and goodbye.